Welcome to the Stellar Vault. Say hi in the comments to awaken the archive. Then like, subscribe, and let the tale begin.
The guns aligned as Threx's console lit up, a line of white code trailing across the glass like scripture. Ratios, target vectors, blessings written in the language of prophet. He read in silence, then pressed his seal. The bridge of the ledger's grace glowed amber and cold, a sanctum built from chrome and restraint. The crew moved in silence, except for the chime of confirmation tones and the faint click of mandibles. To the Karth enclave of Vorthar, silence was reverence, the sound of business done properly. Below them, Haven's Reach turned slowly in the red light of its star, its surface veiled in thin, dirty clouds. A mining world, a human leasehold that had forgotten gratitude. Threx's primary display painted it in crisp blue outlines. Domes, fuel yards, 3,000 lives that no longer balanced the ledger. He recited the audit phrase under his breath, loss accepted, correction authorized. From the forward viewport, the first correction shell fell. A slender dart burning brighter than sunrise. Impact bloom, shockwave, dust ring. The planet blinked once and began to burn. The bridge recorded efficiency metrics. No one looked down. Far below, the world flinched. Atmo alarms screamed through the mining yards. Foreman Jace Rourke was halfway through his shift when the sky cracked open. One moment he was arguing about ore quotas. The next, the eastern ridge turned into light. The blast rolled through the valley like a second dawn. Air trembled. The ground reared under his boots. He saw his son for a single heartbeat, small figure running across the gantry toward the shelter door, and then the windows went white. When sound returned, it was a low roar that carried no shape, only pressure. Dust turned the air to rust-colored fog. The dome over Sector 9 folded inward, glass and steel twisting like paper. Somewhere under the noise, people were still trying to breathe. Jace crawled toward the comm station, his suit cracked, blood misting inside the visor. The transmitter was dead, power cells fried by the pulse. He could still see the beacon tower through the haze, a dark needle against the red sky. And for a second, it looked untouched. Then a second streak fell from orbit and erased it. He never felt the heat. High above, Threx watched the telemetry fade. The columns of numbers resolved to 0. He signed off the report. Correction complete. Asset decommissioned. The bridge murmured the prophet prayer. May the balance hold. Threx permitted himself one glance at the view. The planet's upper atmosphere had become a spiral of glowing debris, curling outward like a slow bloom. Efficient, he thought. Precise. No excess expenditure. The message came in from the Vorthar priesthood before the dust settled. Training material request. Confirmed. He filed the footage and moved on to the next audit. 3 systems away, a relay operator caught the transmission before it was scrubbed. The feed came through cracked and stuttering, overlaid with Enclave logos and instructor notes. Observe thermal distribution patterns in suborbital correction phase. He stared at it for a long time. The humans in the video were running, silhouettes flaring to ash under the shockwave. The voiceover spoke of energy yield and amortized cost. He copied the file into an old directorate channel and sent it to every address he still remembered. The machine stamped a timestamp in the corner. Cycle 714. Origin. Haven's Reach. 2 days later, Captain Aidan Rourke found the file. The hauler's Mercy was half a lifetime old. Paint scorched, reactors temperamental, but she could still run dark. Rourke was in the cargo bay when the feed reached him, the image flickering across a dented monitor. He didn't move for a long time, just watched. The room was quiet, except for the hum of the ship's life support pumps and the faint tick of cooling metal. Chief Orlan Giddy came down the ladder, wiping his hands on a rag. Something on the network? Rourke didn't answer. The reflection of the burning colony flickered in his eyes. When the screen went dark, he finally spoke. Plot a course for the Rothbelt. Use black routes. No transponders. Gede froze halfway through a breath. That's not cargo work. No, Rourke said. It's accounting. He turned away from the monitor, voice steady, expression unreadable. The ship's running lights dimmed as the engines spooled. Outside, the stars drifted past like cold witnesses. Weeks later, reports began to thread through the Enclave's courier nets. Quiet things, statistical anomalies, patrol ships overdue, sensor buoys offline, freight convoys vanishing in the Roth sector. Tactician Vrix compiled the data and sent it upward. Possible retaliation pattern, human origin probable. The message came back marked low priority and an automated note. Human capacity for organized warfare statistically negligible. He sent it again. It came back unchanged. At the same time, Admiral Threx stood once more before the Vorthar ledger, giving his quarterly audit. The Karth, an old, calculating species, had built the enclave of Vorthar, ruling their sectors through faith and arithmetic. Profit was devotion, and every commandment could be balanced. The priests listened without expression, 6 pairs of eyes reflecting the holographic numbers. Profit margins exceeded forecast, Threx concluded. Correction achieved at minimal cost. A junior clerk entered, hesitant. Sir, confirmation from the Roth sector. 6 patrols missing. Threx's mandibles clicked, irritation more than concern. Statistical noise. Patrol crews grow careless. He turned back to the priests and finished the ceremony. The sound of styluses scratching parchment filled the hall. 3 days later, a merchant convoy drifting through the same sector picked up a distress signal. They followed it to a debris field. The wreck was an Enclave patrol ship, hull split open along the keel. The nameplate was still legible. Balance dividend. Near the breach, scorched into the armor with a plasma torch, someone had written 2 words in Terran script. Balance this. The merchant captain ordered full bore and fled the belt without sending a report. By the time the Enclave learned of it, the message had already spread. One more ghost story on the channels humans still haunted. And far out in the dark, beyond sensor range, a single corvette slid through the shadows. Its running lights were off. Its course was steady. Inside, Captain Aidan Rourke watched the stars drift across the viewport, hands clasped behind his back, the reflection of cold fire in his eyes. They burned a world, he said softly. Now they'll learn the cost. The ship's engines answered with a low, hungry growl, and the dark closed around them. The Roth belt drifted like a slow storm, a million fragments whispering against one another in the dark. The hauler's Mercy moved through it on minimal power, hull lights extinguished, engines breathing only enough heat to stay alive. Inside, every sound carried. The tick of cooling plates, the soft rasp of recycled air, the faint hum of the reactor's heart. Captain Aidan Rourke stood at the forward screen and watched wreckage slide past. A broken Directorate corvette rotated lazily, its emblem half-eaten by corrosion. For a moment, the dying symbol caught the faint light of the red dwarf and looked like an ember refusing to go out. He marked its orbit, not for salvage, but for remembrance. Chief Orlin Gide leaned over a diagnostics panel beside him. Power grid's still bleeding, Captain. We've got 4 hours of stealth before something glows we can't hide. Rourke didn't turn. 4 hours is enough. He tapped coordinates onto the chart, every movement measured. Precise. There's an ore station 2 clicks inside the shadow band. We'll take it. Gide's brows lifted. E9 Kestrel? That thing's been dead since the Directorate fell. Then no one will be looking at it, Rourke said. They found the station exactly where forgotten paperwork had left it, tumbling slowly in a field of grit. Its beacon was dark, its rotation uneven. The docking clamps protested when Guide forced them open, a screech like metal remembering pain. The interior smelled of coolant and dust older than both of them. Lights flickered awake as the Mercy's power umbilicals fed in. Gedda walked ahead, flashlight beam cutting through layers of drifting motes. Feels like crawling into a grave. Rourke's voice came back, quiet. Then we'll build something useful out of the bones. They moved through silent corridors until they reached the command ring. Gita started coaxing life from the ancient systems. Patch cables, welded fuses, a curse in every breath. Screens lit one by one, showing static where once there had been numbers. He grinned despite himself. She's ugly, but she breathes. Rourke looked around the dim room, listening to the hum rise. Good. This will do. For what? Giddy asked. Rourke studied the dark viewport. A place to start. Hours later, with the air warm enough to fog, Rourke keyed an old directorate channel into the comm console. The encryption routine flickered alive, archaic symbols scrolling across the screen. His fingers hesitated over the transmit switch only once. To any crew who still remembers discipline, he said. His tone was flat, his eyes fixed on the empty stars. Report for audit. He sent the pulse. Somewhere in the noise of the galaxy, the message began to bounce, through abandoned relays, through pirate nets, through wrecks that still listened. The AI narrator would have called it improbable. Humans called it hope. One pulse. 3 replies. A dozen echoes following. The first to arrive came on a shuttle held together by stubbornness and tape. Its hull was painted with the ghost of an old directorate emblem. The docking clamps groaned again, the airlock cycled, and Sergeant Dren Holtz stepped through. He was broad, graying, his uniform patched with civilian cloth. He carried a crate of rifles that looked older than the man himself. Didn't think anyone still used directorate codes, he said. Rourke extended a hand. We do now. Holtz shook it once. Then let's stop talking and see what we've got. Gede watched them from the control deck, half smiling. Guess you found a believer. Holtz snorted. Beliefs for priests. I just hate losing. They went to work without ceremony. Tools clattered, welders sparked. Human noise returned to the empty station like breath returning to lungs. The word spread. A tug pilot limped in from the edge of the belt, engines leaking plasma. A pair of miners brought crates of spare hull plating. A courier drone arrived carrying a box of munitions and a simple note. For Haven's Reach. The base grew by increments. Gede kept count with chalk on a bulkhead. Ships, people, hours of fuel. Holtz turned storage bays into barracks, drilled whoever could stand straight. Rourke watched the numbers rise and said nothing. When they met in the mess hall, the light was dim, and the air smelled of solder and old coffee. Gede had spread a schematic across the table, a projection of enclave shipping routes stolen from corporate data caches. Rourke pointed at the map. They run their profit convoys through 5 main lanes. We cut those, we bleed them. Gede tapped one line. We'll need fuel, and crews who can fly blind. Holtz checked his chrono, and something to believe they can win. Rourke looked up. They don't have to believe, they just have to act. He outlined the anger protocol in quiet sentences. Seize logistics, cut communications, hit ledgers, not armies. Revenge measured in percentages. The others listened without interrupting. When he finished, the room was silent except for the hum of the projectors. Holtz finally nodded. You sound like you've done this before. Rourke's eyes didn't leave the map. I have. Last time, we were the ones losing. In the quiet hours between shifts, the old ore station hummed like a heart-finding rhythm again. The corridors no longer echoed. Footsteps filled them. Voices murmured over open comms. Engineers argued over oxygen ratios. The smell of burned insulation clung to every sleeve. Humanity's noise had returned to the dark. Holtz drilled the newcomers in an empty cargo bay. The floor was scarred, the lighting uneven. He barked instructions without shouting, the kind of voice that carried authority because it never needed volume. Tighten formation. Keep your safeties red. You don't have to hit what you can scare. One of the younger miners asked, "We really fighting the Enclave, sir?" Holtz looked at him, eyes gray and calm. "We're not fighting them. We're correcting their math." The man didn't ask again. Across the belt, the Enclave took notice. Barely. Reports of missing patrol craft reached tactician Vrix. He compiled loss grids, triangulated debris clouds, and watched the pattern appear like frost. The vectors intersected near Roth sector. He presented his data to Admiral Threx, whose mandibles clicked with irritation. Statistical noise, human wreckage mistaken for ours. Vrix persisted. The signatures show directed action, not drift. A coordinated pattern. Threx's carapace shone in the chamber light. Patterns are what frightened species see when they face randomness. He signed the report without reading further. File it. The Vorthar expect results, not superstition. Vrix watched him leave, then quietly archived the data to a private node. His inner voice whispered something a Karth officer should never think. They're learning. Back in the belt, Chief Gade dragged a ruined beacon onto the station's upper hull. The thing was half melted, its identification plate unreadable. He and 2 volunteers welded braces while Rourke watched from the airlock viewport. The torchlight flickered blue across his face. When the beacon finally lit, it was weak, just a trembling blue flame against the stars. But it worked. Getty wiped sweat from his brow. "You planning to name this place now, Captain?" Rourke studied the light for a long moment. "Not yet. It hasn't earned one." Holtz climbed up beside them, rifle slung over his shoulder. "Then what's that beacon for?" Rourke answered, "So every ship that drifts close knows someone's counting." The 3 men stood in silence, the beacon's glow washing over them, and the AI narrator would have called it inefficient. But to humans, it was ceremony. Within days, more ships arrived, a freighter stripped of cargo pods, a medical shuttle that still smelled of antiseptic, a mining tug armed with plasma drills. They came one by one, power signatures masked, transponders dead. In the dark, they looked like ghosts forming a constellation. From the command ring, Rourke watched their approach. "How many now?" Getty checked his slate. 17 craft, 46 souls fit for duty, 2 reactors we can steal from. "Good," Rourke said. "Keep them dark until we move." Holtz joined him at the viewport. "What's first target?" "Supply convoy, route T9, light escort, heavy fuel payload." Holtz grinned faintly. "First correction." Rourke's reply was flat. "It's an audit." The words settled between them like iron. That night, if night existed in a place without suns, the station's internal lights dimmed to power-save mode. Rourke sat alone in the mess, listening to the hum through the deck plates. The air smelled of metal and recycled coffee. He thought of Haven's reach, of his brother, of the silence after the blast, and let the memory pass without flinching. He didn't need fury anymore. Calculation would suffice. Geda entered quietly, dropped a data pad on the table. "Fuel count's ready. We can move within 30 hours. Rourke nodded. "Wake them at first rotation. No speeches." Geda smiled tiredly. "You're not much for ceremony." "Ceremonies for after." At simulated dawn, the hauler's Mercy detached from the station. One by one, the ships followed. Patched hulls, mismatched drives, engines whispering blue. They drifted together until the beacon's light faded behind them. The narrator counted them in silence. 1, then 3, then 9, then all the rest. Human mathematics written in steel and will. No battle drums, no anthems, just ships sliding into the dark, forming a shape no sensor would recognize until it was too late. Far across the stars, an Enclave trade minister signed new budget allocations for security adjustments and never once thought of Haven's reach. Profit margins remained healthy, balance intact. For the moment, the Roth belt returned to quiet. Only the blue beacon burned on the hull of the forgotten station, faint against the red dwarf's light. It pulsed once every 30 seconds, an old directorate distress pattern twisted into something else entirely. A signal, a promise, a count. By the time the Enclave noticed the missing tonnage of iridium and fuel, the muster was already complete. Humanity had remembered how to count. The convoy came gliding through the black on a line of perfect arithmetic. 3 Enclave haulers, 2 escorts, every course angle timed to the 10th of a second. They moved like commerce itself, orderly, complacent, certain of the balance. In their shadows, a human flotilla waited among the rocks. The hauler's Mercy hung dead cold, her hull painted with dust to scatter radar. Inside, red emergency lamps made every face look carved from rust. Captain Aidan Rourke watched the range numbers tighten on his display. No heartbeat quickened. No one spoke. Silence was part of the tactic. Chief Orlin Gide whispered across the channel, "Convoy inside net perimeter." Rourke's reply was a nod the crew could feel through his tone. "Stand by." Beyond the viewport, the asteroids drifted, slow giants holding their breath. The AI narrator would later mark the moment as statistical perfection. 0 emissions, 0 chatter, 0 doubt. For the humans inside those ships, it was just the sound of patience turning into purpose. The Enclave escorts passed first, sleek hulls gleaming under the red dwarf's light. Their sensors swept the debris field and found only the cold echo of metal. They had scanned this route 100 times. They never looked twice at the ore chunks sliding beside them. Rourke lifted his hand. "Engage." Engines flared blue, brief and surgical. The flotilla broke from the rocks like shards of night. Gedde's voice cut through static. "All vectors green." The first missile salvo struck the lead escort amidships, punching clean through. No explosion, just light venting into vacuum. The second ship turned too late, systems scrambling for a threat that was already inside its skin. Holtz's boarding shuttles latched onto the fuel hauler profit margin. Mag clamps thudded, cutters hissed through alloy. Inside the narrow corridor, air froze into mist as pressure bled away. Holtz went first, rifle tight to shoulder. 3 short bursts, 3 Karth down. The squad moved with precision born of old wars and hard memory. Shock, smoke, silence. They cleared the deck in seconds. "Bridge secure," Holtz reported. "Cargo holds stable." He looked through the viewport at the human ships drifting outside. They never even screamed. Rourke's tone stayed level. "Good. We're not here for noise." Gide's team entered the data core, cables snaking into alien ports. Symbols scrolled, Enclave trade ledgers unfolding like scripture. Ged smiled faintly. "You were right. Their books tell us where they breathe." He copied everything, routes, profit ratios, fleet schedules, and wiped the logs clean. "Leave them alive," Rourke said. "They'll report the loss. I want their accountants to see the deficit." They sealed the Karth crew in the mess hall, stripped of weapons, but unharmed. Holtz welded the final door shut. On the bulkhead outside, he burned a message with his torch. Balance adjusted. Hours later, deep within the Enclave command arcology, tactician Vrix studied the flood of emergency transmissions. 6 lost convoys, same vector signatures, same timing. He layered the graphs, watched the pattern blossom like frost. A quiet dread settled into the gaps of his logic. He recorded his finding in a calm voice, Designation: Human Irregular Activity. Probability of organized retaliation: 92%. He transmitted the file upward through the network labeled Contact Report 01. The reply came back an hour later, short and sterile. Acknowledged. Reclassify as piracy. Vrix reread the message 3 times, mandibles twitching. "They're counting us," he whispered, though no one heard. In the belt, the flotilla drifted behind a curtain of debris. Holtz patched a burn on his arm. Geda ran fuel calculations. No one celebrated. Victory was just another line item. Rourke stood alone at the viewport, watching the captured hauler burn slow against the stars. The firelight traced the scars on his face, the calm geometry of a man who had already accepted the cost. "One engagement," he said quietly. Gede's voice crackled over the comm. "And a clean balance sheet." "Keep it that way," Rourke answered. "We move again when the books settle." The ships powered down one by one, disappearing into the dark. Far off, the wrecked convoy turned on its axis, spilling fuel like golden dust. When an Enclave rescue cutter finally arrived, its searchlights found only drifting cargo and a single word carved into the bridge wall: "Contact made." The Enclave called it piracy. The humans called it accounting. History would remember it as the first battle of the Audit War. The Icarian belt was a wound in space, shards of magnetized ore circling a dead world, every rock charged and whispering static. Ships that entered without maps usually didn't leave. To Captain Aidan Rourke, that made it perfect. From the bridge of the hauler's Mercy, he watched a projection of the field shimmer in red and blue, a storm of interference that looked almost alive. "If they come looking," he said, "this is where they'll die." Chief Orlin Gady adjusted a cluster of sensor drones. "If they come in force, it's where we'll die too." Rourke's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "Then we'll just have to make the math work." Below them, crews fitted shaped charges to drifting rocks, welding metal to stone in the silent dark. The flotilla had learned to move like miners again, slow, methodical, invisible. Sergeant Dren Holtz oversaw the boarding teams, his voice clipped and calm across the channel. "Keep spacing tight. The first one who loses sight of his tether gets left out there for the Karth to find." He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. When the last mine armed itself with a dull green blink, Rourke ordered power down. The belt swallowed their heat signatures until only the beacon of the traps remained, weak, wandering, indistinguishable from magnetic noise. The humans waited. Patience had become their strongest weapon. 2 systems away, Admiral Threx received a report that turned his carapace the color of old blood. Another convoy lost. Another humiliating silence from the Vorthar. He struck the data slab with a claw. "Send everything we have. 2 strike cruisers, 4 escorts. If these humans want war, give them economy of scale." Tactician Vrix hesitated. "Admiral, the belt's magnetic instability. Efficiency demands risk," Threx snapped. "Deploy and correct." He watched the fleet icons launch from their moorings and told himself it would be quick. The numbers always said so. The Enclave ships entered Icarian space in parade formation, sensors sweeping like searchlights through fog. The asteroids answered with faint whispers of false returns, hundreds of them. The commanders barked for recalibration, unaware that every new ping drew them deeper into Rourke's geometry. On the Mercy, Gede read power spikes across his screens. "They've taken the bait. 2 heavies, 4 pickets, coming straight through Corridor 7. Rourke nodded once. "Mark every 10th rock. Detonate on my mark." The convoy advanced another 10 kilometers. The first ore cluster exploded, a silent bloom of plasma that tore sensors apart. The Enclave formation rippled. Orders collided. A cruiser turned to port, engines overburning, and struck another mine. Light scattered like shattered glass. Now, Rourke said. All along the belt, human ships powered up in sequence, their drives burning brief blue flares before going dark again. From Threx's flagship, it looked as if the asteroids themselves had come alive. Holtz's boarding pods fired from a hidden freighter, small and fast, riding the shockwave of debris. They hit the Enclave cruiser Balance Divine amid the chaos. Metal screamed, mag clamps bit, and the pods burrowed through the armor. Inside, the corridors filled with haze and motion. Holtz moved like a craftsman. 3-round bursts, every shot placed. The Karth soldiers fought by doctrine, rank formations, predictable arcs. Holtz's team cut through them like wire through ice. He keyed his comm. Deck 4 secure. Reactor room in sight. Copy, Rourke replied. His voice never rose above normal speech. Get what you came for and go. Gaede's systems showed the enemy fleet breaking apart in panic. Half their comms down, half blind from static. They can't tell what's shooting at them, he said. It's working. It's math, Rourke answered. Holtz's team planted charges along the cruiser's spinal conduit and withdrew. On the outer hull, they launched away just as the belt flared white behind them. The Balance Divine split along its keel, a bright seam across the dark. The shockwave caught 2 escorts and rolled them into debris. Threx watched the feed from his flagship, disbelief cracking his posture. They lured us! Vrix, standing behind him, whispered, They counted you. Threx turned, mandibles clicking in rage. Silence! Vrix said nothing, but his eyes recorded every frame. He would study it later and know. The humans had learned to fight without wasting motion, without joy, without mercy. Hours later, the surviving Enclave ships fled the belt trailing wreckage. The human flotilla powered down and sank back into the static field. Gaede reported 27 casualties, 1 lost shuttle. Holt sat on the cargo ramp, armor scorched, watching the stars spin. We hurt them, he said quietly. But they'll come bigger next time. They will, Rourke agreed. And now they know where to look. He turned toward the viewport, face lit by the dying fires of the Enclave wrecks. Which means we move. Gaede folded his arms. We just won a battle. You want to run? I want to choose the next ground. Outside, the Icarian belt magnetic lines shimmering like veins of light. The Enclave wrote the engagement off as a logistical error. The humans recorded it as an equation solved. And somewhere in the dark, both sides began to understand the cost of learning. The wrecks from Icarian still drifted when the silence began to stretch. No new patrols came. No transmissions. The belt had gone still except for the faint crackle of static across the ore fields. To Captain Aidan Rourke, it felt like the breath drawn before another strike. He walked the length of the hauler's Mercy in silence, boots ringing softly on the deck. Everywhere he passed, crews worked without speaking much, welding sparks through brief constellations against the bulkheads. In the machine bay, Chief Orlan Gaede was half buried in a tangle of cables, coaxing a burnt reactor to live again. On the firing range, Sergeant Dren Holtz drilled recruits through their routines. The sound of weapon cycling carried like a heartbeat through the corridors. Every shot was deliberate, a punctuation mark in the quiet. 3 days later, Gaede intercepted a propaganda feed bleeding through Enclave frequencies. He ran it on the main screen, a priest accountant, intoning the standard phrases, all profit and calm. The words scrolled underneath in flawless Enclave script, human piracy contained, balance restored. Holtz leaned on the console and spat into a cup. Maybe we should send them a thank you note. Rourke studied the transmission, expression unreadable. No, a correction. He turned toward Gaede. How far can you push a signal from this tub? Gaede wiped a hand across his chin. Across half the sector if I tie every antenna into the nav array. Might melt the coils, though. Then make it count, Rourke said. "We're going to speak." They built the transmitter out of whatever still worked. Salvaged Enclave relays, mining dishes, even a pulse engine wired backwards. Sparks filled the command ring, ozone burning the air. Gede muttered over each circuit as though it could hear him. Holtz brought a single chair from the mess hall and bolted it to the deck. Rourke sat in it, the scarlet recording light blooming against his face. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clean, each word weighed like metal on a scale. "This is Captain Aidan Rourke of Haven's Reach. You destroyed a world for profit and called it a correction. We are your correction. We will audit your every act until the ledger reads even." He stopped there, breathing through the silence. Gede watched the levels steady, mouth half open. Rourke finally added one more line. "To the workers who still count the cost, remember who built your ships." He nodded once. "Send it." Gede hit transmit. The signal left the belt like a whisper turning into a scream. It rode through abandoned relays, scavenger beacons, and old Directorate satellites still orbiting dead moons. It split and multiplied, ghosting into every channel the Enclave thought it owned. Inside the Enclave capital, alarms rippled through the communications hive. Priests shouted for containment. Half the screens flickered with static. The other half showed a human face speaking words that no algorithm could erase. Threx watched the footage from the bridge of the Ledger's Grace, his mandibles drawn tight. "Shut it down." "We can't," one of the techs said. "It's replicating through trade relays." Across the room, Tactician Vrix leaned closer to a monitor. "They're using our own accounting frequencies. They learned the language." Threx slammed a claw on the console. "Then overwrite them." Minutes later, his counter-broadcast went out across the same channels. "All human enclaves declared criminal. Every contractor subject to liquidation." The two signals tangled in the airwaves. Lines of human voice laced through enclave decrees until the entire spectrum sounded like a single argument. In the Rothbelt, the humans listened. Their own voices came back distorted, layered with alien prayers and system beeps. The mess hall filled with the echo. Holtz grinned around a cup of cold coffee. "Guess they heard us." "They all did," Gede said. "Even the ones who didn't want to." Outside, the belt lit with engine flares as independent haulers and stray miners began changing course toward the beacon. The broadcast had become a magnet. Rourke watched from the viewport. "Every ship that comes is a risk." "Every ship that comes means they believed you," Holtz said. Rourke didn't answer. The flicker of new drives painted his face in orange light. Hope and danger made the same color. Far away, riots began on Enclave mining worlds. Workers refused quotas, chanting a phrase none of them understood. "Audit complete." Vorthar priests burned ledgers and temple furnaces to purify the numbers. And across the networked markets of 1,000 species, profit forecasts began to tremble. Back in the belt, the humans prepared to move again. Gede sealed the fried coils, Holtz checked weapons, and Rourke plotted new coordinates. Gede asked, "We staying to watch the fireworks?" "No," Rourke said. "They'll start triangulating before the laughter dies." He looked once more at the screen, still playing his message in an endless loop. "Shut it down. They've heard enough." The monitor faded to black, leaving only the faint hum of the engines. In the core system of Vorthar, a solitary priest sat before a wall of dead monitors. The last echo of the human voice played again and again, glitching through the silence. The priest's mandibles moved in a whisper. "They speak balance," he said, "and they mean war." The Enclave called it Operation Balance Fall. In practice, it was panic written as doctrine. Admiral Threx stood before the priest accountants, the light of 10,000 data streams crawling across his carapace. "Human insurgents," he said, "now occupy 6 minor belts. Their communications infect trade networks. Correction must be absolute. He wanted the room to see certainty. What they saw was fear given structure. Tactician Vrix bowed low, antennae trembling. "Admiral, our convoys are already overextended. If we push to full purge—" Threx cut him off. "Profit demands efficiency. We bankrupt them before they can adapt." The priests nodded and stamped their seals. Balance fall was approved. In the Roth Belt, the humans watched the declarations flicker through stolen channels. On the bridge of the Hauler's Mercy, Captain Aidan Rourke studied a rotating hologram of Enclave traffic routes, bright arteries of commerce now pulsing with warships. Chief Orlan Gede leaned over the display, one eye squinting through fatigue. "They're pulling everything toward the core," Gede said. "Depot's thin as bone out here." Rourke traced a slow circle around the outer sectors. "Then that's where we'll cut." He looked to Sergeant Dren Holtz. "Form 3 groups. Each one acts like it's alone. No signals once we move." Holtz nodded once. "What do we call this?" "Counterstrike," Rourke said. "We're not fighting their fleet. We're fighting their accounting department." The flotilla split before dawn's cycle. Drives flared, then went dark as the ships slipped into shadow. Gede took half a dozen freighters rigged with demolition gear toward the outer depots. Holtz led boarding crews along convoy lanes thick with slaves and guards. Rourke kept the core group, 3 gunboats and the Mercy, aimed at an Enclave communications node on the edge of Vorthar space. Silence held for 6 days. Then the first signal returned. Static, followed by Gede's voice, thin but steady. "Depot 47 neutralized. Reactor collapse complete. Lost 1 hauler. Worth the tonnage." A day later, Holtz's report arrived, heavy with background noise. "Convoy taken. Civilians freed. Half can't stand. Sending them home on captured hulls." Rourke listened to both and nodded. He turned to the tactical screen where his own target waited, a lattice of towers glittering against the planet's night side. "Time for the accountants," he said. The Hauler's Mercy slid through the upper atmosphere, its plating glowing faint red. Gede's calculations brought them in under the station's radar bloom. They latched onto the command node's docking spine like a barnacle. Rourke led the entry team himself. The corridors inside were narrow, humming with the clean rhythm of Enclave machinery. Holtz's recorded voice played in Rourke's head. "Keep it quiet, Captain. Noise wastes ammo." They advanced in silence, 2 shots at a time, never more. Karth officers fell before they could call alarms. The humans reached the central archive, a cathedral of glass and blue light. Data columns rose like pillars, each one inscribed with ledgers of lives. Gede's voice came through the comm. "We've got 2 minutes before they notice the loss of pressure. Copy what you can." Rourke's fingers moved across alien consoles. Symbols cascaded into Terran text. "Haven's Reach. Correction authorized." He froze, reading the line twice. The bombardment had been deliberate, an efficiency decision. He copied everything, every proof, then keyed the demolition charges. "Data secured," he said. "Pull out." They reached the airlock as alarms finally screamed. The Mercy tore free, engines burning blue. Behind them, the command node folded inward, fire curling like paper. In the aftermath, reports poured across human channels. Depots gone, convoys raided, stations aflame. For the first time, the Enclave's losses outpaced its profits. Priests whispered that balance fall was cursed. On the Mercy, Gede cataloged the data hall. "We've got proof, Captain. Names, orders, everything." Rourke sat on the bridge, eyes fixed on the casualty list flickering on his display. The Courier Ashen, destroyed during withdrawal. 100 crew. No survivors. He closed the slate without a word. Holtz stepped beside him. "We hit them hard." "We paid for it," Rourke said. "Keep the ships moving. They'll come with everything now." Outside the viewport, The debris of the command node glowed faintly, drifting through the dark like embers refusing to die. Somewhere within that light were the first verified numbers of the audit war. Costs measured in lives, profits measured in vengeance. At Icarian, humans learned to fight. At Counter-Strike, they learned to pay. And across the ledgers of two civilizations, the balance began to shift. The Karth came with every ship that still had fuel to burn. The Enclave fleets entered human space like a tidal equation made flesh. Columns of warships, carriers, and drone swarms, all moving to the same rhythm. The first sensor echoes reached the Roth Belt at midnight cycle. By dawn, the stars themselves seemed to move. On the hauler's Mercy, Captain Aidan Rourke stood in the bridge glow, watching a wall of red icons spill across the map. "So," he said softly, "they found the numbers." Chief Orlin Gide ran a quick calculation. "They've thrown half their treasury at this. 200 hulls minimum." Sergeant Dren Holtz crossed his arms. "Then we make it cost them the other half." Rourke looked up from the display. "No speeches. Evacuation protocol. Get everyone to the shuttles." Outside, the first barrage hit the belt. Asteroids shattered, spraying molten dust through the void. Human freighters tried to run, thin, bright lines against the dark. But the Enclave's formation covered every escape vector. The sky turned white. Gide's hands moved fast over the console. "Beacons burning out. They're triangulating on the muster station." "Then we bury it," Rourke said. He triggered the scuttling charges himself. The beacon that had called humanity to war, once a quiet blue flame, flared brilliant for a heartbeat, then vanished in a cloud of glowing fragments. The birth of the resistance erased by its own children. The retreat lasted 6 days. Ships jumped from orbit to orbit, cutting engines, hiding in electromagnetic storms. For the men and women aboard, it was terror learned by repetition. Every hour another signal went silent. The flotilla thinned until the Mercy ran dark and alone. When they reached the outer edge of Helos 9, a swollen gas giant with rings the color of old iron, Rourke ordered full stop. The remaining ships limped into formation. 6 hulls, 23 guns, and a heartbeat's worth of fuel. Holt stared out at the faint light filtering through the rings. "Hell of a place to die?" Gide answered with humor. "Plenty of room for ghosts." Rourke ignored them both. He studied the star charts with the calm of a man counting backward from the end. "They'll chase us here. That's fine. Let them." He turned to his officers. "We still have what matters. Proof. Haven's reach wasn't a mistake. It was policy. If we show that to the galaxy, the Enclave collapses under its own math." Holtz frowned. "How do you show it? We've got no network left." Rourke pointed toward the distant blip on the chart. "The flagship ledger's grace. We take theirs." When the plan was set, Gede stayed behind in the cargo bay, surrounded by cables and explosives. The biggest freighter in their line, Hauler 9, would serve as bait. He'd rigged her reactors to overload on command. Rourke found him tightening the last bolt. "You sure about this?" "You'll need a hole in their formation," Gede said. "Somebody has to make it." Rourke's jaw tightened. "We'll find another way." Gede shook his head. "Numbers don't lie. You taught me that." He wiped his hands and added, "Quieter. Keep the books clean, Captain." They shook once, no words left. Hours later, Hauler 9 drifted ahead of the fleet, alone, silent, its lights dimmed to the glow of a dying ember. Gede sat at the reactor console, helmet off, sweat beading on his brow. The comm crackled with Rourke's voice. "You still with me, Chief?" "Still here." "You've done enough." "Not yet." Gede glanced at the readouts. Radiation climbing, containment slipping. "I can order you to pull back," Rourke insisted. A faint smile. "And I can ignore you, Captain. I've got seniority and bad decisions." He paused, listening to the hum of the reactor, the ship's last heartbeat. Tell Holtz he still owes me a drink, and keep the numbers clean. The line went dead. Rourke stared at the silent comm display until the static faded to black. Then the stars lit up. Outside, the Hauler 9 drifted forward, broadcasting a weak distress code. When the Enclave ships moved in for capture, Gede closed his eyes and triggered the sequence. The explosion rolled through the ring field like a sunrise. Radiation and dust boiled outward, blinding sensors, ripping formation apart. Then the Mercy slammed into the Ledger's Grace, and the shock reverberated through both ships. Grapples locked, sparks leapt across the joint. The rest of the flotilla followed, attaching like barnacles to a leviathan. Inside, the boarding teams advanced through smoke and ruin. Holtz's rifle barked in bursts. Rourke's pistol barked once for every doorway. The corridors were full of flame and dust and the taste of copper. On the Enclave bridge, Admiral Threx turned as the bulkhead exploded inward. Humans spilled through the smoke, armor blackened, eyes steady. Rourke stepped in last, sidearm lowered. Threx's mandibles clicked. "You cannot win." Rourke's voice was quiet. "We already did. You just haven't seen the balance sheet." He signaled to Gede's replacement at the comm panel. The stolen data from Haven's Reach uploaded into the ship's central core, broadcasting through every surviving relay in the Enclave network. Across 1,000 systems, the truth unrolled in cold text. Correction order, 714. Haven's Reach. Profit variance. Terminate. Threx lunged, but Holtz fired once. The Admiral fell without ceremony. Rourke turned to the crew still at their posts. "Leave, your war's over." None resisted. They simply stepped aside, eyes reflecting the burning data streams. The humans withdrew before the reactor chain reached them. The Ledger's Grace burned slow, light washing across the broken rings of Helos 9. Behind it, the last of the Enclave fleet scattered into retreat. On the bridge of the Mercy, Holtz sank into a chair, helmet under one arm. "He did it," he said softly. "Gede did it." Rourke watched the fading fires. So did we. No one spoke again. The deck hummed with the echo of his name. Outside, the stars began to return, one by one, through the clearing dust. Balance fall was not the end. It was the subtraction before the final sum. And in the dark between ruins, humanity prepared its final audit. The silence over Helos 9 lasted 3 days. Debris drifted through the rings like frozen embers, and what remained of the human flotilla circled among them, battered and half-dead, but unbroken. The war had narrowed to numbers, ships, fuel, breaths per minute. By every account, they should have been finished. Captain Aidan Rourke stood at the forward viewport of the Hauler's Mercy and watched the wreckage turn. A faint pulse on the console marked the only thing still moving in the galaxy's data streams, the truth they had unleashed. Enclave networks flooded with evidence of their own corrections. Profit charts crashed faster than any fleet. Chief Orlan Gede was gone. Holtz limped through the bridge with a field brace on his leg, armor scorched. "Fleet's down to 9 hulls," he said. "Could be less by morning." Rourke didn't look away from the viewport. "9's enough." Holtz gave a dry laugh. "You keep saying that." "It keeps being true." Outside, the stars were thin, fewer every year, or maybe just harder to see through the dust. Across Vorthar space, chaos bloomed. The priest accountants tore ledgers apart, rewriting balance sheets in panic. Civil crews refused orders. Profit logic turned inward and began consuming itself. For every Enclave ship still hunting, 3 more sat dead, paralyzed by algorithms that could no longer define victory. On the Mercy, Rourke stared at the scrolling telemetry. They'll burn the evidence soon. Once the priests consolidate, they'll lock the network. Holtz frowned. "Then we get to it first." Rourke nodded. "Final broadcast. Straight through Vorder Prime's relay." Holtz blinked. The capital? The root of their code. Once we write it there, it's permanent. He turned to the crew. We don't fight to survive. We fight to finish. No one argued. The jump to Vorthar Prime nearly tore the ships apart. They jumped blind, chasing the final coordinate Geed had left in the data core, a ghost guiding them through the dark. The Mercy's hull screamed as it re-entered real space, alarms bleeding into a dull hum. Around them hung the largest armada humanity had ever seen. Thousands of Enclave vessels arranged like a cathedral around their capital world. Holtz exhaled. You ever seen so many targets? Rourke keyed the command line. Transmit the codes. The Mercy's signal leapt ahead of them, wrapped in the Enclave's own encryption. Prophet Priority Omega. The nearest defense grid received the data, parsed it, and hesitated. To the machines, Rourke's fleet now read as high-value couriers. Gunfire stuttered, then stopped. Now, Rourke said. The human ships dove straight through the hesitation, sliding between carrier formations, while the Enclave's own targeting logic rewrote itself in confusion. Every kilometer they advanced, another layer of defense fell silent, waiting for instructions that never came. By the time the network corrected itself, the Mercy was inside the capital's upper atmosphere. The relay tower loomed above the clouds, a needle of glass and gold. Holtz's boarding craft slammed against its side, clamps locking with a metallic shriek. The hatch blew inward, and the squad advanced through the smoke. They moved without words. The only sound was the rhythmic hiss of rebreathers and the faint vibration of gunfire through metal floors. Rourke entered last, carrying the data core salvaged from the Ledger's grace. It felt heavy as memory. He placed it into the central console, hand steady. The system flared with blue light, a chorus of alien symbols spilling across the air. Upload complete in 40 seconds. Gaeta's recorded voice echoed through the speaker, his final message embedded in the code. Keep the numbers clean. Holtz watched the doors, rifle ready. 30 seconds. Through the walls, they could hear the Enclave's last defense teams closing in. Boots, claws, the scrape of metal on stone. 20! A single round punched through the doorway. Holtz returned fire, 3 bursts, then silence again. 10. The console chimed once, clear and perfect. Across every Enclave system, the data unfurled. Orders, casualty lists, financial records, every act of genocide written into their sacred ledgers. The truth became part of the network's permanent architecture, impossible to erase. Rourke stepped back. Done. He turned as the doors finally gave way. Holtz covered the retreat, eyes bright under the smoke. Go. They left the relay burning behind them. By the time they reached orbit, the planet below was already changing color. Millions of network relays overloading in synchronized failure. The Enclave's great economy, the faith that had ruled 1,000 worlds, was erasing itself. Days passed. The war didn't end in a ceremony. It just stopped. Enclave fleets went dark. Colonies declared independence. Priests walked into their own flames. The stars filled with silence again, this time earned. On the bridge of the Mercy, Rourke sat alone. Holtz approached, slower than before. We're down to 100 souls, he said. Guess that's the fleet now. Rourke nodded. He looked out at the drifting wrecks, their lights winking out one by one. Think they'll rebuild? Holtz asked. Rourke's answer was quiet. Everyone rebuilds. The question is whether they remember why they fell. He keyed the transmitter one last time and sent a short packet into the void. No speech, no signature, just a single line of data. Audit complete. He shut the console down and walked away.